The easiest way to discover who truly cares about you is to remove everything they think they love about you. Alexander Whitmore had everything people dreamed of having: a powerful name, a successful empire, a luxurious home in New York, and a life that appeared impossible to challenge. To the outside world, Alexander was a man who had already won. But behind the polished image was a question that had followed him for years. If everything disappeared tomorrow, who would still see him as the same person? Alexander had built his life around control. Every decision was calculated, every relationship carefully observed, and every opportunity measured. As the head of a powerful organization, he understood that people often approached him because of what he could provide. Some wanted connections. Some wanted influence. Some wanted access to a world they could never reach on their own. The hardest part was knowing who cared about Alexander Whitmore the man, not Alexander Whitmore the name. His upcoming marriage was supposed to represent the final piece of a perfect future. His fiancée, Victoria Hayes, came from an impressive background and seemed to fit perfectly into the life everyone expected him to have. She was elegant, confident, and admired by the people around them. Many believed Alexander had found the ideal partner. But recently, small moments had caused doubt to grow in his mind. He noticed how conversations changed when money, status, or appearances became part of the discussion. He wondered if the affection around him was real or simply connected to the life he provided. Alexander did not want to make assumptions. He wanted proof. Not the kind of proof that came from questions or conversations, but the kind that revealed people's true choices when circumstances changed. That was when he created a plan that only a few trusted people knew about. Alexander decided to make everyone believe he had lost his fortune. He would step away from the image that protected him and watch what happened when the power disappeared. It was not about revenge or creating problems. It was about finding the truth before making one of the biggest decisions of his life. While Alexander prepared his secret test, there was one person in his home who paid attention to details others ignored. Amelia Brooks, the plus-size maid who had worked there for years, noticed the changes happening around her. She was not interested in Alexander's wealth or position. She respected him because of how he treated people when nobody was watching. Many people overlooked Amelia because of her job and appearance, but she had always understood more than others realized. She knew the routines of the household, the personalities of the people around her, and the small details that revealed character. Alexander never expected Amelia to become important in his plan. To him, she was simply someone who worked quietly in the background. But sometimes, the person standing in the background is the first person to notice the truth. As Alexander prepared to remove the one thing that made everyone pay attention to him, he had no idea that his greatest discovery would come from the person he noticed the least. The day Alexander Whitmore changed everything began quietly. There were no announcements, no dramatic signs, and no indication that the man everyone believed was untouchable was about to reveal a completely different reality. Behind closed doors, Alexander carefully prepared every detail of his plan. He knew that the moment people believed his wealth was gone, their reactions would reveal more than any conversation ever could. Alexander had spent years building relationships with people who respected his success. But he had always wondered how many of those relationships would survive without the comfort of his influence. Before making such a serious decision about his future, he needed to know the truth. The first changes happened gradually. Alexander began reducing the appearance of luxury around him. He stopped allowing certain expectations to control his daily life and started observing the people around him more carefully. He paid attention to conversations, reactions, and small moments that most people ignored. His fiancée, Victoria Hayes, noticed the changes quickly. At first, she asked questions with concern, but Alexander could sense that her interest was focused more on what the changes meant for her future rather than how he felt about them. He did not make any accusations. He simply continued watching. Meanwhile, Amelia Brooks continued her work as she always had. She arrived early, organized the household, and handled responsibilities with the same dedication she had shown for years. She did not treat Alexander differently because of rumors or uncertainty. To Amelia, respect was not something given only to powerful people. It was something everyone deserved. One morning, she noticed Alexander seemed unusually quiet. Instead of asking about his financial situation or making assumptions, she simply asked if he was doing well. It was a small question, but it stood out to him. Many people around him wanted to know what was happening with his business. Amelia wanted to know how he was feeling. That difference stayed in his mind. Alexander began noticing things about Amelia that he had previously overlooked. She remembered small details, solved problems before they became serious, and treated everyone in the household with the same kindness regardless of their position. She never tried to gain special attention. She never used her connection to him for personal benefit. She simply did her job with pride and integrity. As the rumors about Alexander's financial situation slowly spread, the atmosphere around him started changing. People who once called frequently became harder to reach. Invitations became less common. Conversations that once focused on opportunities became distant and uncertain. Alexander expected this reaction, but experiencing it personally still revealed something important. He realized how many connections in his life were connected to what he represented rather than who he was. During this time, Amelia noticed the changes happening around the household. She did not know Alexander was testing anyone, and she did not understand the full situation. But she could see that something was different. She noticed the way certain people acted when they believed Alexander had fewer resources. She noticed the difference between those who cared and those who only cared about appearances. Alexander continued observing everything carefully. The test he created was beginning to show him exactly what he wanted to know. But he had not expected one thing. The person who understood the situation most clearly was the one person he had never considered part of the test. Amelia Brooks was quietly proving that loyalty was not connected to wealth, status, or opportunity. It came from character. And Alexander was beginning to realize that the person he had overlooked might be the only person who truly saw him. As the days passed, Alexander Whitmore continued watching the reactions around him, and the truth became clearer than he expected. The life he had carefully built was revealing itself in unexpected ways. People who once admired his success were now showing how quickly their attitudes could change. Alexander had always understood that wealth created attention, but he had never fully understood how much it influenced the way people treated him. Now, without the protection of his public image, he was finally seeing the difference between genuine respect and simple admiration for what he owned. Victoria Hayes, his fiancée, became the person Alexander watched most closely. Before the changes began, she had always appeared supportive and confident about their future together. She knew how to present herself perfectly at events and understood the importance of maintaining appearances. But as Alexander's situation seemed uncertain, small details started revealing a different side of her personality. Her conversations became more focused on what she might lose rather than what Alexander was experiencing. She asked about plans, arrangements, and expectations, but rarely asked how he felt during the difficult transition. Alexander did not want to judge her too quickly. He reminded himself that everyone reacts differently when circumstances change. However, the contrast between Victoria's behavior and Amelia Brooks's quiet actions became impossible to ignore. Amelia never asked Alexander about his finances. She never tried to learn what was happening behind the scenes. Instead, she continued treating him with the same respect she had always shown. She offered help when needed, remained professional, and carried herself with confidence despite being ignored by many people around her. One afternoon, Alexander noticed Amelia staying late to organize the household after a busy day. He asked why she continued putting in so much effort when nobody seemed to recognize everything she did. Amelia looked surprised by the question. She explained that she did not measure her value by how much attention she received. She believed that doing something well mattered, even when no one was watching. Her answer stayed with Alexander because it represented everything he had been searching for. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted to be noticed, but Amelia was someone who found meaning without needing approval. Alexander began realizing that his test was revealing more than the loyalty of others. It was also revealing how little attention he had given to people who were always present. Amelia had been part of his world for years, yet he had never taken the time to understand her ambitions, experiences, or dreams. He had seen her position, but not her potential. Meanwhile, rumors about Alexander's financial situation continued spreading. Some people began distancing themselves completely, while others attempted to maintain connections for their own reasons. The difference became obvious. When there was something to gain, people were eager to stay close. When uncertainty appeared, many disappeared. Through it all, Amelia remained consistent. She did not treat Alexander like a different person because his circumstances seemed different. She believed character mattered more than circumstances. That simple belief challenged everything Alexander had assumed about loyalty. For the first time, he questioned whether he had spent years searching for the wrong qualities in the people around him. He had looked for intelligence, influence, and social connections. But perhaps the quality that mattered most had been something much simpler: honesty. As Alexander continued his secret observation, he realized the most unexpected part of the entire situation. The person who had the least reason to stay was the person who stayed without hesitation. And that discovery was beginning to change the way he viewed everyone around him. The truth Alexander Whitmore was searching for became clearer with every passing day. His secret test had started as a way to understand the people around him, but it was slowly becoming something much more personal. He was no longer only watching others. He was also beginning to see himself differently. For years, Alexander believed that being respected meant being powerful, successful, and impossible to replace. He had built a life where people listened when he spoke and followed his decisions without question. But now, as his carefully created image began to disappear, he discovered something unexpected. The person who understood him the most was someone he had barely taken the time to know. Amelia Brooks had always been present in the background of his life. She handled responsibilities, noticed details, and quietly helped keep everything organized. Yet Alexander had never asked about her dreams or the experiences that shaped her. He had seen her role, but he had never truly seen her as a person. That realization stayed with him. One evening, Alexander found Amelia reviewing notes for a small community program she hoped to develop in the future. Curious, he asked her about it. Amelia explained that she wanted to create opportunities for people who often felt overlooked. She understood what it felt like to be judged before anyone took the time to understand her. Instead of allowing those experiences to make her bitter, she used them as motivation to help others. Alexander was surprised by her perspective. Many people around him focused on gaining more influence, but Amelia focused on creating something meaningful. She did not talk about recognition, wealth, or attention. She talked about purpose. Her words made Alexander reflect on his own choices. He had spent so much time protecting his reputation that he had forgotten to consider the impact he had on others. He had built an empire, but rarely stopped to ask whether he was building a life that truly mattered. As Alexander continued observing Amelia, he noticed the qualities that separated her from everyone else. She was respectful without seeking approval. She was hardworking without expecting praise. She was confident without needing to prove herself. These qualities were exactly what Alexander had been searching for, but he had never looked in the places where they existed. Meanwhile, Victoria Hayes became increasingly focused on the consequences of Alexander's supposed financial problems. Her concerns were less about supporting him emotionally and more about protecting the future she had imagined. Alexander noticed the difference between someone who cared about the person and someone who cared about the lifestyle connected to that person. He did not feel anger. Instead, he felt disappointment because the answer he had hoped would be different was becoming obvious. The most important lesson from his test was not that people could change when circumstances changed. He already knew that. The lesson was that he had failed to recognize the people who had always been genuine. Amelia never needed Alexander's wealth to show respect. She never needed his influence to believe he deserved kindness. She treated him the same way whether he appeared powerful or uncertain. For the first time, Alexander understood that loyalty was not proven during moments of success. It was revealed during moments when there was nothing to gain. As his plan continued, Alexander realized he was approaching a decision that would affect more than his future. It would determine whether he continued living according to appearances or finally chose a life built on truth. The moment Alexander Whitmore realized the truth about the people around him, he understood that his secret test had revealed more than he expected. He had started this plan because he wanted certainty before making one of the biggest decisions of his life, but now he was facing a different challenge. He had discovered the truth about others, but he also had to accept the truth about himself. Alexander had spent years believing that he could understand people through careful observation and strategic decisions. He thought he could recognize loyalty by analyzing behavior, but Amelia Brooks showed him that the most meaningful qualities were often found in the simplest actions. She never tried to impress him. She never changed the way she treated him. She never asked what she could gain from being near him. She simply continued being the same person she had always been. As Alexander watched Amelia work on her community project, he became even more curious about the person behind the role everyone overlooked. He asked her why she cared so much about helping people who were often ignored. Amelia explained that she knew what it felt like to be underestimated. She had experienced moments when people judged her based on her appearance, her position, or their assumptions about her abilities. Instead of allowing those experiences to define her, she decided they would become the reason she treated others with more understanding. Her answer made Alexander think about his own life. He had always been surrounded by people who wanted to be seen, but Amelia was different. She had already discovered her value without needing anyone else to confirm it. That confidence came from within, and Alexander respected it more than he expected. While Alexander was learning more about Amelia, Victoria Hayes continued revealing the difference between appearance and reality. The woman who once seemed perfectly matched with his world became increasingly focused on protecting the future she thought she deserved. Alexander noticed that her attention was connected to the lifestyle they represented rather than the person he was beneath that lifestyle. The realization was difficult, but it also brought clarity. He understood that the image of perfection he had been chasing was not the same as genuine happiness. One afternoon, Alexander found himself having a conversation with Amelia that changed the way he viewed their relationship. He asked her if she had ever felt unnoticed despite everything she contributed. Amelia admitted that there were times when people failed to recognize her efforts, but she never allowed their opinions to determine her confidence. She believed that personal value did not disappear simply because others failed to see it. Those words stayed with Alexander. As someone who had spent his entire life being noticed, he realized he had never considered what it felt like to be overlooked. Amelia had strength that did not come from power or influence. It came from knowing who she was. The more Alexander learned about her, the more he understood why his original assumptions had been wrong. He had looked at her position and believed he understood her place in his world. But he had never considered that she might be someone capable of changing the way he viewed that world. As the final stage of his plan approached, Alexander knew the truth could no longer remain hidden forever. Soon, everyone would learn that the situation had not been what it appeared to be. And when that moment arrived, Alexander would discover not only who had failed the test, but who had passed it without ever knowing there was one. The day Alexander Whitmore decided to reveal the truth was closer than anyone realized. For weeks, he had watched the reactions of the people around him and carefully studied what happened when they believed his power and wealth were no longer there. The results were impossible to ignore. Some people disappeared the moment they thought he could no longer provide opportunities. Others became distant because they no longer saw the same advantages in staying connected to him. But one person remained exactly the same. Amelia Brooks continued showing the same patience, respect, and dedication she had always shown. She never asked questions about what Alexander had lost. She never tried to discover what she could gain. She simply treated him like a person. That simple difference had changed the way Alexander viewed everything. Before the truth was revealed, Alexander spent time thinking about how he would handle the situation. He knew his decision would affect many people, especially those who believed they understood his life. He also knew that revealing the test would force him to face uncomfortable conversations. However, he accepted that honesty was necessary. The purpose of the test was never to embarrass anyone. It was to understand the reality of the relationships surrounding him. During this time, Alexander found himself spending more time talking with Amelia. There, conversations were no longer limited to work or daily responsibilities. He began learning about her goals, her experiences, and the ideas she had carried for years. He discovered that Amelia had always been ambitious, but she never measured success by recognition alone. She wanted to create something meaningful and help others who felt invisible. Alexander admired that because it was the opposite of the world he had known. His environment often focused on status, reputation, and influence. Amelia focused on purpose. One evening, Alexander asked Amelia what she thought made someone truly wealthy. He expected an answer about money or opportunities, but her response surprised him. She said that real wealth came from having people around you who valued you even when there was nothing to receive in return. Her words reflected the lesson Alexander had been trying to learn. For years, he had protected his financial success but neglected to consider the quality of the connections around him. Meanwhile, Victoria Hayes continued making choices that revealed her priorities. She became more concerned about maintaining appearances and protecting her future than understanding what Alexander was experiencing. The difference between her actions and Amelia's became impossible to overlook. Alexander finally accepted that the person he planned to test had already revealed herself, while the person he never considered part of the test had already proven her loyalty. As the final preparations for the reveal continued, Alexander felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief because he finally understood the truth. Disappointment because he realized how long he had ignored the qualities that mattered most. He thought about all the times Amelia had helped without expecting anything. He remembered every moment she showed kindness when nobody was paying attention. Those memories became more meaningful than any display of loyalty from people seeking his approval. When the day came to reveal the truth, Alexander knew his life would change. The world around him would see the reality behind the illusion. But more importantly, Alexander would finally acknowledge something he had overlooked for years. The person who stood beside him when she believed he had nothing was the person who understood his true value all along. The moment Alexander Whitmore revealed the truth behind his financial situation finally arrived, and the reaction was exactly what he expected, yet still difficult to witness. For weeks, he had watched people change when they believed his influence was gone. He had seen conversations become colder, invitations disappear, and relationships that once seemed strong become uncertain. But now, everyone would understand that the situation had never been what it appeared to be. Alexander gathered the people closest to him and explained the truth calmly. He revealed that his financial struggles had been part of a test designed to understand who truly valued him beyond his success. The room became quiet as people processed the revelation. Some were surprised. Others were uncomfortable because they realized their own actions had revealed more than their words ever could. Victoria Hayes struggled to explain her choices. She had always presented herself as someone who understood Alexander, but her actions during his difficult period showed a different reality. She had been focused on protecting the future she expected rather than supporting the person she claimed to love. Alexander did not respond with anger. Instead, he felt a deep sense of disappointment because he finally understood that the relationship he believed was built on trust had been based on something much more fragile. Then Alexander turned his attention to Amelia Brooks. Unlike everyone else, she was not surprised by the situation because she had never been focused on what Alexander owned. She had treated him with the same respect before, during, and after the test. Alexander thanked her for something she never realized she had done. He thanked her for reminding him that kindness and loyalty were not connected to wealth or status. Amelia did not see herself as someone special. She simply believed that people deserved respect regardless of their circumstances. Her humility made the moment even more meaningful for Alexander. He realized that the person he had overlooked for years had shown the exact qualities he had been searching for all along. After the reveal, Alexander began making changes in his own life. He no longer viewed people based on their positions or what they could offer him. He started listening more carefully and recognizing contributions that had previously gone unnoticed. Amelia's influence was not about changing who Alexander was. It was about helping him understand parts of himself he had ignored. Later, Alexander spoke privately with Amelia and admitted that he had made a mistake by only seeing her role instead of seeing the person behind it. Amelia appreciated his honesty, but she reminded him that recognizing a mistake was only the beginning. What mattered was what he chose to do afterward. Those words stayed with Alexander because they reflected the wisdom he had admired from her from the beginning. As the days passed, people around Alexander noticed that he was different. He was still successful, still respected, and still capable of making difficult decisions, but he approached life with a new perspective. He understood that true loyalty could not be purchased, and genuine connections could not be created through status alone. The test had started as a way to discover the truth about others. Instead, it became a lesson that changed Alexander himself. He finally understood that the person who had the least reason to stay had given him the greatest reason to believe in the value of trust. After the truth was revealed, Alexander Whitmore expected his life to feel different, but he did not expect the greatest changes to happen within himself. For years, he believed that having control over every situation was the key to success. He thought careful planning and strong decisions were enough to protect him from disappointment. But the experience taught him something he could never have learned from business meetings or financial strategies. The most valuable things in life could not be measured by numbers or status. They were found in trust, honesty, and the people who remained genuine when there was nothing to gain. Amelia Brooks continued focusing on her own goals after everything was revealed. She did not suddenly change her personality or expect special treatment because Alexander recognized her value. She remained the same person who arrived early, worked hard, and treated everyone with respect. That consistency was exactly what continued to impress Alexander. He realized that Amelia's strength came from something deeper than confidence. It came from knowing who she was and refusing to let other people's opinions define her. Alexander began supporting Amelia's community project in a different way. He no longer approached her ideas as something he needed to manage. Instead, he listened and offered support when she requested it. He understood that true respect meant allowing someone to build their own success rather than trying to take control of it. Amelia appreciated the change because she had never wanted someone to solve her problems. She wanted opportunities to use her own abilities and create something meaningful. Their conversations became more honest over time. Alexander shared parts of his life that he rarely discussed with anyone else. He admitted that growing up with power and responsibility had made him cautious about trusting people. He had learned to protect himself by keeping distance, but that distance had also prevented him from recognizing genuine connections. Amelia understood because she knew what it felt like to be judged without being understood. She told Alexander that everyone carried experiences others could not see, and sometimes the people who appeared the strongest were the ones who needed someone to truly listen. Those words stayed with him. As Alexander changed, the people around him began noticing a difference. He became more thoughtful in his decisions and more aware of the people who helped create his success. He started recognizing employees who had worked quietly for years and giving credit where it was deserved. The lesson Amelia showed him extended beyond their personal connection. It changed the way he viewed leadership itself. Meanwhile, Amelia continued building her future with confidence. She never forgot the moments when others underestimated her, but she no longer allowed those moments to define her. Story. She knew her value before anyone else recognized it. That was something Alexander admired deeply. One evening, Alexander thanked Amelia for changing the way he saw the world. She smiled and reminded him that she had not changed him. She had only shown him a perspective he had never taken the time to see. Alexander realized she was right. The transformation happened because he finally allowed himself to look beyond appearances. The person he once considered part of the background had become the person who helped him understand what truly mattered. And for Alexander Whitmore, that discovery was worth more than anything he had ever owned. Months after Alexander Whitmore discovered the truth about the people around him, his life looked different from the outside. He still carried the same responsibilities, made important decisions, and remained a respected figure, but the way he approached the world had completely changed. The experience taught him that success was not only about what someone built or achieved. It was also about the people who stood beside them when there was no reward waiting. Alexander often thought about the moment he decided to test everyone around him. At the time, he believed he was searching for answers about other people. Now he understood that he was also searching for a better understanding of himself. He had spent years believing that strength meant never needing anyone. Amelia Brooks showed him that real strength came from knowing who deserved trust. Amelia continued growing her community project, turning her ideas into something that helped people who had often been ignored or underestimated. She remained focused, determined, and humble despite the attention her work began receiving. Alexander admired that she never changed because of recognition. She had the same values before people noticed her efforts, and she carried those values after others began respecting her. That consistency reminded him why she was different. She did not need approval to know her worth. One afternoon, Alexander visited the center where Amelia worked on her project. He watched as she encouraged others, listened to their concerns, and created an environment where everyone felt valued. He realized that Amelia had a natural ability to bring out the best in people. She did not lead through authority or status. She led through understanding. It was a quality Alexander had rarely seen in his own world. He had always believed leadership came from having the final decision. Amelia showed him that leadership also came from making people feel seen. Their relationship continued developing through mutual respect. Neither of them tried to create a perfect image for others to admire. They focused on honesty and trust. Alexander learned that Amelia did not become important because she changed his life. She became important because she reminded him of the person he wanted to become. He was no longer the man who judged people based on their position or appearance. He became someone who looked deeper and recognized value where others failed to see it. Amelia also learned something from Alexander. She discovered that even people with great power could carry doubts and fears they rarely showed. She understood that everyone had a story beyond what others could see. Their connection was built on that understanding. It was not about one person saving another. It was about two people learning from each other and becoming better because of it. Looking back, Alexander realized that the greatest lesson from his secret test was not discovering who failed. It was discovering who had already succeeded without knowing they were being tested. Amelia had never tried to prove anything to him. She had simply lived with honesty, kindness, and confidence. That was what made her unforgettable. The world had always noticed Alexander because of his power. But Amelia was the person who helped him understand that the most meaningful connections were not created by what someone could provide. They were created by who someone truly was. And in the end, Alexander found the one thing he had been searching for all along. Someone who saw the person behind the name.